and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
Wow, we woke up. I'm Ann Northrup. Hello.
Hi, and we do start with some good news. The Respect for Marriage Act cleared the Senate and is on its way to enactment.
And that's pretty much the end of the good news this week. We move on after that to the U.S. Supreme Court hearing the major LGBTQ rights case that's been all over the news.
We're going to talk. We have a guest, Michelangelo Signorile, who broke the story of how anti-LGBTQ bigot Tucker Carlson's programs are executive produced by an out gay man.
I suspect he's not a nice man, but I don't know him, so I'm only speculating. Homeland Security is warning of increasing threats of violence as the right-wing assaults on drag shows and LGBTQ people in general accelerate.
But in New York, there was some progress in the hunt for criminals who are drugging, robbing, and at times killing gay men in bars or coming out of bars in New York.
Yeah, we lost this week a pioneering lesbian feminist, an out gay Republican former member of Congress, and a renowned pipe organist.
An Iranian official says they're abolishing the morality police, but don't expect to let up on LGBTQ people there, or women for that matter.
Yeah, there's some thought that they just are changing their names. The gay-themed movie Spoiler Alert, starring Jim Parsons, opens in theaters, and Andy has seen it.
We start with the Respect for Marriage Act. It passed the Senate 61-36. There are the four, essentially, senators who shepherded this bill through the Congress. That's Susan Collins of Maine there on the left at the podium. That's out lesbian Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin. Then there's Rob Portman, a Republican from Ohio who has a gay son, and Kirsten Sinema of Arizona. They did a lot of hard work. They worked with advocates on, all of our advocate groups and lobbied those senators, and they got it done.
And not in that picture, but also active in that organizing and lobbying were Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina and Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. It was a group effort. It was a bipartisan effort. And now this Marriage Act is ready for the president to sign. And
it has to pass the House in its current form.
I'm thinking ahead because most of our viewers will see this down the road.
Well, Jim Obergefell, whose case ended the Defense of Marriage Act, which this overturns, and required states to open marriage to same-sex couples, worries that there are far too many concessions were made to those who use their religious beliefs as a weapon to persecute us in this bill.
Well, let's be clear about this bill. This bill anticipates the possible overturning of the Supreme Court decision legalizing same-sex marriage in the Obergefell decision. But like the Roe decision, this is not going to legalize same-sex marriage in the states. It allows the states to legalize same-sex marriage and requires states to honor same-sex marriages legally performed in other states.
Well, wait a minute. DOMA never stopped states from legalizing same-sex marriage on their own.
Right. But if
the federal government won't recognize it and other states don't have to recognize it.
35 states in this country ban same-sex marriage by law or constitutional amendment in their constitutions. And so only 15 states currently legalize same-sex marriage on their own. So if the Supreme Court does overrule Obergefell, throwing out the decision that legalized same-sex marriage across the United States and returns it to being a state decision, we have a lot of work to do because 2/3 of the country does not perform same-sex marriages if that decision is overturned.
That work needs to be going on now.
Well, I say this because news reporters are saying this Respect for Marriage Act will legalize same-sex marriage and preserve its rights. No, it doesn't.
Well, it does say that a state, if I were married in New York to a same-sex partner and I moved to Texas, they would have to recognize it. It does say that, yes?
It does, but that assumes that Texas is not going to find other ways around that, which it could.
So passage of this in the Senate and getting all those 12 Republicans on it depended upon, protecting nonprofit religious groups, churches and things from having anything to do with that. And that's what was part of it. But there were senators who wanted to go further than that, like Mike Lee, the Mormon, even though the Mormon church supported this bill, who wanted to essentially, exempt anybody with any religious feeling from complying with it. So those amendments were beaten back soundly by him and Marco Rubio.
The amendments were by them. It wasn't beaten back by them.
No.
Yeah. So don't think that marriage is now going to be protected because there are a lot of loopholes in this. And that brings us back to the Supreme Court, which, as Congress was passing the Respect for Marriage Act, was going through its own little dance to take rights away from us, thereby confirming that we need every piece of legislation we can get. So the Supreme Court case is about a website designer in Colorado, a right-winger who is in league with the Alliance Defending Freedom, which ginned up this case out of nothing, because this website designer says, I design websites. I want to start a new part of the business that designs websites for couples getting married. But I don't want to do that and then find out later on that if I refuse a same-sex couple, I'm going to be sued by the state of Colorado. I'm going to have to go through court cases, blah, blah, blah. I want to find out up front that I have the right to refuse same-sex couples because I'm an artist and I have free speech rights and I can do whatever I want.
She wants the right to put on her website, Irish need not apply. No, gay couples need not apply. She wants to put that up there out front. And she says it's all about her free expression and the First Amendment. And well, boy, what's happening with this is the undermining of human rights laws in general. If you can not serve people because you object to them in whatever way, I mean, the laws are worthless. And there were a lot of questions about, well, where do we draw the line on this? What about interracial marriages? Well, if you have a religious objection to interracial marriages, she wouldn't have to do that either. That clearly came out in the discussion.
Well, the only thing I would say is that the Constitution in the amendments, doesn't it include more protections from discrimination on the basis of race?
Well, like 14th Amendment, the post-Civil War stuff, you could argue that. But I mean, again, if you have a sincere religious belief, this is all about, she says, you're asking me to engage in compelled speech. Now that the other question is, who's speaking on the website? You're not writing it. This is what the couples are saying. You're not saying this. This isn't your speech. This is their speech.
I thought that was a very powerful discussion yesterday, but we are now at the real nub of this question, because she's arguing this in Colorado because Colorado has a non-discrimination law that includes sexual orientation and gender identity. And she's saying, I don't have to pay attention to that law because I have a greater right under the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment to express what I want. Hasn't she heard that Donald Trump says the U.S. Constitution should be terminated?
Yes, indeed.
Yes. So this is really all the plot, the ongoing plot of the Alliance Defending Freedom and other right-wing, particularly legal organizations that have taken a very long view. They have a plan. They are going to chip away at our rights one by one and go through this conservative Supreme Court that they now have ready to work in league with them to do this.
This is a court that has no respect for civil rights, that has no respect for voting rights that were passed unanimously by the Congress. And the only right that they, respect are two rights: gun rights and religious freedom. That's it. That's what America is, according to them. And you can't have a pluralistic society if you go that route. It's just going to further divide the country.
Well, the Constitution does explicitly protect religious freedom, but then we should be having a discussion of what constitutes religious freedom and where the lines are drawn around that.
Well, that's,
we know you can't shout fire in a crowded theater, so there must be other boundaries and limits too.
This woman, the website designer, she says, well, I serve LGBTQ people who come into me if they want a website for something else that's not about false marriages, is what they kept calling them. But I would urge you not to use her services if she's that much of a bigot.
Well, and people say that, why would you want to go to someone who treats you like that? And of course you don't want to, but as has long been explained, not every city, town, or state has options for people. And, there may not be another bakery or another florist or another website designer within reach of you. So to allow people to discriminate is anathema to most of us and is a real practical problem. And of course, you don't voluntarily walk into a place like that looking to be discriminated against. And so if you do, when you are, that's a pretty big blow to you to have someone say to you, I don't serve your kind, get out of here.
Well, we'll find out in June exactly where they're going to draw the line, but obviously we're not optimistic about it.
No, all the coverage assumes that the conservatives are going to come down very hard on non-discrimination laws around sexual orientation.
And of course, it will open up other areas of discrimination, believe me. Now, one of the positive developments at the Supreme Court this week was that 10 members of the National Trans Bar Association were admitted to practice before the U.S. Supreme Court this past week. Justice Alito, apparently during the ceremony, did not look happy, but Justices Jackson, Kagan, and Sotomayor beamed. And then
Alito is just getting more and more overtly nasty.
Oh, well, if you listen to him in the arguments, he's also losing his mind, but that's another issue.
Okay.
And then some happy news this week from Washington, the state dinner that was held by President Biden for Emmanuel Macron, the French leader. They had a lot of LGBTQ people on the list, and we have pictures of some of them. There's Sharon Kleinbaum and Randy Weingarten. They are a married couple. Sharon is a rabbi. Randy is the head of the National Teachers Union. Then there was Sharon.
Wait, you forgot to label Randy the most dangerous woman in America.
I wasn't going to bring that up in this happy context, because that's something Mike Pompeo said disgustingly. And then there's Sharon with Pete Buttigieg. You might remember him. He's the transportation secretary, okay. And then Sharon is there with Ariana DeBose there on the left, the Oscar-winning actress, and the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre. So a good time was had by all. Tim Cook was there. Robin Roberts was there with her wife. Yeah.
It's surrealism in everyday life to see this happy out LGBTQ crowd at the White House at a state dinner. And then just down Pennsylvania Avenue, you have what's going on at the Supreme Court. Very strange.
Let's go to our guests. Yes?
Sure. Michelangelo Signorile, longtime journalist, came out with some startling news this week.
And joining us now is Michelangelo Signorile, the host of the Michelangelo Signorile Show on Sirius XM. Welcome. And Mike, the last time you were with us, you were on to talk about dealing with prostate cancer. How are you doing now?
That's right. I think it was last year at this time, and I had discussed publicly how I'd been diagnosed with prostate cancer, and the options were. It was very early on, and whether or not I should seek treatment. And I did go for treatment. I think I talked about that with you. I went for a radiation treatment, in and out one day, radiation seed implants. And I'm happy to report that I got very few of the side effects that come with that, which are sort of like, you urinate a lot and that kind of thing. I did very well. And my PSA has gone down dramatically, and it seems like it's going very well.
All good to hear. And now, well, Anne, go ahead.
We have you on at holiday times to discuss prostate cancer. And now the monster who is bringing us Tucker Carlson and Fox News. You broke a very big story the other day. He wasn't hiding. He was hiding in plain sight. But the guy who is really in charge of all of the hatred of Tucker Carlson is an out gay man.
Yes, his name is Justin Wells, and he is someone who has risen up very high in Fox News with Tucker Carlson. He was on Greta Van Susten's show. That's kind of where he, cut his teeth at Fox. He'd previously been in television, in Florida and other, news organizations in different parts of the country, affiliates. But he started at Fox and was with Greta, and then he created that show with Tucker. And let's be clear, Tucker has always had a failed career in television. Every show he had was canceled. So Justin Wells really helped make that show. He soon rose to senior executive producer, and then he was made a vice president at Fox in charge of all Tucker Carlson products, which includes the show as well as all of these various elements of Fox Nation that Tucker Carlson is on. That's Fox's streaming channel. And other people I spoke to, former Fox employees and producers, said there really isn't anyone who's risen this high. They could only make a correlation with maybe O'Reilly's senior producer, who was in charge of all his merchandising. But even that, one person felt he's even more powerful. So this is somebody who has the ability to disseminate all of this horrific hate that Tucker Carlson puts out there, and does do it for him.
And
well, remind us.
Just as an example, when the Club Q shooting happened in Colorado Springs, they booked Gays Against Groomers and a guest who said these attacks would continue until drag queens stopped appearing where children might see them. That's the kind of stuff that's on the Tucker Carlson show.
Oh, horrendous, ugly, brutal stuff. As the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida was being debated and then passed by Ron DeSantis, Tucker Carlson was on a campaign attacking critics of the bill and using the groomer smear. And at one point, he even said that teachers who don't comply with the law should get beaten up. His relentless campaign against trans teens, and this is in line with the rest of the extreme right, trans teens and their parents, and getting gender affirming care. He actually legitimized hospitals coming under attack and getting threatened for giving gender affirming care. He said it's what they should be expecting. So a lot of this hate, and of course, there's the white supremacist hate, the replacement theory, all of it.
Now, we're certainly familiar with Republican gays who may have different opinions than those of us on the other side. But this goes to an extreme. And you haven't talked to this guy, right?
No, I did ask for comment, and he immediately looped in a PR person at Fox who then tried to get me on the phone. And I said, no, I don't have time to get on the phone. I've asked for a comment to my story about him working for Tucker Carlson as Tucker Carlson promotes this hate. And they never responded with any statement.
So do you have a theory as to why someone could go this far in promoting this kind of really homicidal hatred against LGBTQ people when he in fact is gay?
Well, I want to be clear that this is somebody who has been out as a gay man. So this isn't a case of a closet case who's tormented, someone who was outed. And, you know, when we think about those people, they've repressed their sexuality, they're tormented, they're in the closet, and then they suddenly find themselves in these situations where they have to try to prove they're not, you know, they overcompensate to prove they're not queer, and they wind up doing enormous harm, right? We know that particular dynamic, right? Doing enormous harm to others. It's the classic, you know, bully who bullies people because he's trying to prove he's not, you know, one of them. That's his, you know, report story. I reviewed the marriage data. He's been married for over 10 years. I reviewed property data. He and his husband have owned a home in New York City and a country home as well. He's been openly gay to friends and family. They celebrated their wedding. He has been involved in NLGJA, the Association of LGBTQ Journalists, in years past. So this is somebody very open, and who willfully, you know, decided to go and work for Tucker Carlson and, of course, Fox News. Now, there are a lot of gay people who work at Fox News, and in fact, they've been involved in NLGJA in the past. And, you know, sometimes they rationalize it as, well, I'm not working on that show or this show. I'm just in news, or I'm in administration. And, you know, I think it's kind of a slow creep. For these people, they wind up, they start at affiliates around the country, and maybe it's a Fox affiliate, and they tell themselves, well, it's different from, you know, Fox Network. And then a job opens up at Fox Network, and they take that, and it's good money. And we know how it works, and we've seen other journalists go to Fox News who used to do good work on CBS or ABC or NBC. So I think it's the money, the status. But those I spoke to who used to work at Fox and are gay, they couldn't believe he went that next step and then would actually become part of this hate machine of somebody like Tucker Carlson. Maybe at the beginning, it wasn't clear what Tucker was going to do with that show. You know, Tucker has become much more extreme over the years. Who knows? But he's clearly making very good money. And that seems to be a driving force. Some of those who knew him said it boggled their mind because in years past, they never sensed anything conservative. But one person who did know him very well said, I'm not surprised, because this is someone who's showing their true colors, and remembered some instances, some comments, and simply said, he and Tucker are two peas in a pod, simpatico.
And I'm not surprised that you were attacked by Donald Trump Jr., who amplified your story, and the out gay Trump administration official, Richard Grenell. So anyway, thanks for the story. It's fantastic. It's all over the world now, and at least people know there's a lot of hypocrisy over there.
Well, just before we let him go, talk for a minute about the reaction you've gotten from the right wing and how much you've become a target of theirs.
Well, you know, it really is interesting. And since the story, more people have spoken to me. More people have come forward who've known him. And a couple of those people have said, this clearly got to him, and this clearly got under his skin, because he's very cool as a cucumber, very, you know, quiet. And he clearly enlisted Donald Trump Jr., Richard Grenell, a whole bunch of people on the right who are leaders of think tanks, to just send out these tweets attacking me that then inspired, I'm telling you, hundreds and hundreds of trolls. It's like an army of just horrible, disgusting slurs and attacks. And it was just crazy. And he clearly was very angry. And he retweeted all of those big names like Donald Trump Jr. Himself. So it clearly bothered him immensely, but no word on what it meant for Tucker or what it meant for people at Fox News. I'm still, you know, getting information, and I'm going to keep on this story, and I'm going to expose every time, you know, there's another hateful thing Tucker puts out, that there's a gay man behind it.
Well, thank you for that. We'll follow along with you and look forward to you uncovering more information. Are we going to link to your story, or can people see your story?
They can go and read it on my Substack newsletter, signorile.substack.com, signorile.substack.com.
Thank you, Mike.
It's great to see both of you. Thanks for all your work.
And it's great to know that you're healthy and in good shape.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
Congratulations on both counts.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
well, it's really stunning. I think this guy at Fox, this gay man who's running all the hate speech there, has got to be someone who is just not a happy guy and is really a nasty piece of work.
well, he's making a lot of us unhappy with the violence that he's ginning up. I mean, we just heard that California State Senator Scott Wiener is getting credible bomb threats at his home and office, accompanied by hateful anti-LGBTQ rhetoric. He's been targeted by Charlie Kirk, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who called him a communist groomer. And these are the people who've been reinstated on Twitter by Elon Musk. And Greene wants to ban gender-affirming care entirely, and they are literally inciting violence against people who support gender-affirming care.
Very directly. And these are the magic words for the right wing these days: communist and groomer. They've refined their approach and figured that out. You ask Republicans in Georgia why they won't vote for Warnock. Democrats are communists. That's the answer. And that's why there's no crossover and no bipartisan work, because we have been identified as communists and groomers.
Well,
but let's go on to a few other
there
things.
is some justice. The trans oath keeper, Jessica Watkins, was convicted, though not like Mr. Rhodes there, of the Oath Keepers, the leader, of seditious conspiracy.
She did say to the court that she was felt really stupid and very sorry for having fallen for this rhetoric, like Tucker Carlson's rhetoric. So she at least has come to that point. A lot of people have said that who were at the January 6th insurrection, and I wonder where that leaves us. Why can't they figure it out going in? It's not like no one told them differently.
On the other hand, the United States bowed to pressure by Muslim extremists in Indonesia and canceled the visit of our LGBTQ envoy there, Jessica Stern. The Indonesian Ulema Council said the visit would harm the nation's religious and cultural values, something you might want to consider before booking a holiday in Bali. Indonesia's parliament this week passed a ban on extramarital sex and cohabitation of unmarried couples. It goes into effect in 3 years and carries prison sentences. And acts like these can be reported by spouses, parents, or children. Now, gays can't marry, so all of our sex is extramarital there.
Exactly. So let's dive into the violent attacks and threats taking place across the country. First, starting at the top, we should thank President Biden for being in touch with the heroes from the Club Q murders, the massacre. He sent a letter to the club owners. He called them. He called Fierro, the hero who tackled the shooter. So that was a good thing. But meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security put out a very scary report in the last few days, warning of terror threats against LGBTQ people being persistent and lethal and escalating. They identified Twitter hate as a particular element of this. But we have known about these attacks for a long time. We report about them every week on this show. But the government agencies and others are finally getting serious about seeing this as a particular phenomenon. And we have a long list of things this week.
Well, before you leave Colorado, the suspect there was charged on 305 counts, including hate crimes, although that doesn't add anything in terms of penalties. By the way, we should say the club itself has vowed to reopen. saying that's what the community wants. It's a space we've provided for 20 years. They need it, they want it, and we're going to reopen it.
Well, meanwhile, a man in Texas was arrested for threatening to shoot a doctor who provides youth trans care in Boston.
Yep.
In Atlanta, Georgia, a man was arrested for violent threats against LGBTQ bars there, and he was found to be harboring weapons. In Minnesota, in Minneapolis, a man was arrested for threats and having guns in a gay bar. He walked into it, and it was only when he started making verbal threats that they grabbed him and investigated and found he was carrying guns.
And by the way, a lot of this is being spread by Twitter now. A report found that anti-LGBTQ slurs have increased on the site 900% under Elon Musk. A lot of it after the Colorado Springs massacre.
Oh yeah, that really provoked people. In Florida, in Lakeland, Florida, and in Fort Lauderdale, there were Proud Boys events in both cities going after LGBTQ people, going after school board candidates who were sympathetic to progressive ideals. Moms for Liberty was part of those events too. And in Ohio, there was a Proud Boys Patriot Front rally against a scheduled drag queen story hour at a church. The church canceled the event, but the Proud Boys showed up anyway and were extremely threatening.
And this was sponsored by a school at a Unitarian church. And the Proud Boys promised that their action would be wild. Police told the school, hire a private duty officer who may or may not show up due to understaffing. A volunteer safety group offered protection, but the performers at the story hour said they didn't feel safe, so they didn't want to go through with it. And that's what's happening. I mean, very famous drag queens such as Evie Oddly of Colorado, pictured there. We have a picture of Evie with Plastique,
yes.
Evie on the left there. Who was a winner of RuPaul's Drag Race, asked her management company for more security staff to guard her shows and check the auditorium for guns.
And you know what other performance this week was checked? Kiki and Herb at the Beacon Theater. They set up metal detectors for everyone entering. They inspected everyone very closely. Now, they are performance art. They are nightclub performers. They appear at Carnegie Hall. And yet their performance this week of their Christmas show, which is edgy, certainly, had to be protected, extensively by security. Anyone doing anything like this now has to set up extensive security. And then in North Carolina, we have the story of the shooting out of the power substations. And the first rumor that came out was that it was done to stop a local drag show at a local theater. And there you see the theater in the dark. The only light there is from car headlights, I think. And you see in this Facebook posting, God will not be mocked, by some woman who thinks this is a...
They put 44,000 people into darkness there in Moore County. An area,
all week.
Area with a lot of golf resorts, by the way.
I've been there to Pine Needles, which is right in that town, for golf camp. We don't know whether it was actually targeting the drag show, but the first person who went online to claim it was a right-wing crazy woman who said, I know why this happened. They're shutting down that evil, ungodly drag show. So whether this was targeting the drag show or not, that's where everybody goes for their first guess. Right. And their first attempt at scapegoating and justifying this.
I mean, drag is as American as apple pie. Don't they remember Milton Berle and Flip Wilson? This used to be on TV all the time.
Well, it has been repositioned now.
Well, let's go to New York City. More victims of the drugging and robbing coming out of gay bars. They slip you a Mickey. GHB actually, and have come forward, and at least 2 have been reported to be dead this year. But these guys came forward from past attacks. Oscar Alacron, 33, drugged at the Ritz Bar right there in the theater district, robbed of $2,000 in 2020. He woke up in a strange hotel lobby. He filed a police report, and there was no follow-up. New York Times spoke to 5 men drugged at the Eagle, the Boiler Room, the 9th Avenue Saloon. One was robbed and kept captive in his apartment by someone he met on Grindr, which could also be a hazard. But most are drugged with this GHB, which is not included in most routine drug and toxicology tests. And then there's Tyler Burt, 27, robbed of more than $25,000 after he was drugged at the Boiler Room of the East Village last December. And when he complained to the police, they said, that he'd been assaulted. They said, you weren't assaulted. He said, getting drugged is being assaulted. And the police, say that they're now looking into these things, and that, there is surveillance footage of one of the victims being let out of the bar. They haven't released it yet. And I'm hoping that they're trying to find this guy and crack this case.
I'm sure there's a lot of surveillance footage. There's surveillance footage of the guy who threw a brick at a bar 3 times in a week. And there's got to be more surveillance footage of the people doing this. GLAAD put out a report saying that there were 124 violent events and threats recorded so far in 2022. And I suspect that's, again, as usual, the tip of the iceberg. The violence is really escalating, and it's time to pay close attention to this. And police departments are very spotty in their response. I'm glad to be able to report the arrests, but those, I think, are the most egregious cases and observed more in the breach than in execution.
In the meantime, don't let a stranger buy you a drink. Always make sure your drink is attended at all times when you go to the restroom or whatever you do. These are important things to do and this is happening not just to gay people, it's happening to non-gay people at clubs. It's just an easy way to rob people, but you sometimes end up drugged and dead.
And it's a good idea to be with a friend or 2 or 3 to try to protect you, and so you don't get dragged out of a bar semi-conscious.
We are very trusting people, but you have to be, in these times, be careful. All right.
Well, a little justice for one lesbian who was run down in New York City in a hit and run attack last year. Lisa Baines, a very well-known actress, hit by a car that kept going. It
was a scooter, actually.
Okay.
The driver, Brian Boyd, pled guilty to manslaughter and leaving the scene of an accident and was sentenced to 1 to 3 years. The DA sought 3 to 9 years. Baines was survived by her wife, Catherine Cranhold, who called Boyd, who ran a red light, heartless and reckless.
Ran a red light and ran from the scene. So I think 3 years is pretty light for killing someone and leaving the scene. All right. Where should we go from here?
Our mayor, Eric Adams, visited Qatar ostensibly to look into how we're going to handle the World Cup. But a lot of people took him on for, how anti-gay Qatar is. And he said, we embrace all lifestyles in our city. Come on, Mayor, get with the modern program.
Doing well.
In Germantown, Pennsylvania, Black trans woman Diamond Jackson McDonald, 27 years old, was shot to death inside her mother's apartment on Thanksgiving, November 24th. No obvious signs of forced entry. This is the 35th trans person murdered this year, recorded murdered this year. We should also...
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to mention the census data came out from 2021. Same-sex couple households exceeded 1 million for the first time.
1.2.
31.6% of same-sex couples are interracial. That's interesting, versus 18.4% of heterosexual. 710,000 of those same-sex couples are married, 500,000 unmarried.
60-40.
Yeah, and DC had the highest percentage of same-sex households, 2.5%.
Yeah, and this is 120% rise in the last 13 years. And when they first started looking in the census surveys at same-sex couples living together, none of them were married because it wasn't legal. But they started looking at them, and now 60% of the ones they find are married, which is a pretty interesting jump from zero. And a big number, and they're in every county in the United States.
Wow.
And that's it was the Williams Institute people who first worked with the Census Bureau to get them to include these questions 25 years ago, and it was a way to show members of Congress that yes, they have constituents who are LGBTQ. And of course, this is only picking up couples who are living together. It does not pick up the LGBTQ population in general, or couples who may not be living together or whatever. It's a very small subset of the entire LGBTQ population.
But getting married, of course, does involve a certain amount of coming out. You've got to come out and go down to the Bureau and announce yourselves. And you don't have to put an ad in the paper. But you can't get married anonymously.
And you mentioned the trans lawyers admitted to the Supreme Court. There are now 9 out trans state legislators around the country. And they almost uniformly report that they decided to run for office, which is pretty cheeky in this world we're describing. Because they were compelled to try to stop the anti-LGBTQ legislation being proposed everywhere.
We're motivated. All right, let's talk about some people we lost this week, starting with pioneering lesbian feminist activist Barbara Love. She was an elder when I entered the movement in the mid-'70s. She's died at the age of 85 in New York back on November 13th, but we're just hearing about it from her wife, Donna Smith, who said it was leukemia and Parkinson's. Pre-Stonewall, she was beaten by thugs for not being sufficiently feminine. She was very close to Kate Millett and part of the Lavender Menace that stood up to Betty Friedan at the National Organization for Women. Now, this is a picture of Barbara Love there with the Mother's Respect Your Daughter's Choice sign with her mother. And the mother sign says, "Love's mother loves love." And because Barbara, with Morty Manford and the Manfords and her mother, were founders of the Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, the Parents of Gays, back in 1972, I think. And that, of course, is the organization that is worldwide now.
She was maybe most famous outside those organizations for her book, Sappho Was a Right-On Woman, a liberated view of lesbianism that she wrote with Sidney Abbott in 1972.
Sidney Abbott was her lesbian partner.
Yeah, at the time. She also told the story of coming out to her brother, and her brother said, "You better get off that ship. That ship is sinking." And her response was, "I am the ship."
I am that ship, Douglas. She was also one of the founders of Identity House, which does counseling, walk-in counseling for LGBTQ people. So really a pioneer and someone who paved the way for all of us.
Terrific, beloved person.
And then we lost an out gay Republican member of Congress, Jim Colby, at the age of 80, Arizona Republican, who retired after 11 terms in 2006. He came out publicly in 1996 when The Advocate was on the verge of reporting his gayness. He had
voted for the Defense of Marriage Act,
yeah,
which almost everybody else did too. That's a longer story.
80% of the Congress voted for it, including Chuck Schumer.
Yes, but he had voted for it, and The Advocate, everybody knew he was gay. He just wasn't out. And The Advocate threatened to write about that because here he was, a gay man, voting to forbid recognition of same-sex marriages. And he said, well, I'm not going to let you treat me like that. I'm going to come out on my own. Well, the heck with you. But he did become more and more liberal, and he really pushed for the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which forbade military
He supported
service.
abortion rights and, a path to...
He was very pro-immigration as a representative from Arizona, and in the end, very anti-Trump.
Now, he was the first out gay speaker at a Republican convention. I was there in 2000 in Philadelphia. This is the first time they had an out gay. He wasn't talking about gay stuff. He was talking about trade, which was his specialty. And the Texas delegation gets up, turns around, and prays while he's speaking. Charming.
Very charming. He also was on the advisory board of the Log Cabin Republicans. So once he came out with a bang.
And then, we also
Reverend Peter Carey.
Yes, Peter Carey was an out gay Episcopal priest who worked in gay activism and AIDS ministry from the 1980s. He's died at the age of 84. He was a friend. He's survived by his husband, David Natoli. He started out as a Catholic priest in 1966, but switched to Episcopalians over gay issues. He was a founder of the AIDS Memorial Chapel at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine and the chair of the church's AIDS Memorial Fund, which funded AIDS startups. He was a terrific guy.
We also lost Frederick Swan at the age of 91, who was living in Palm Desert, California. He was a legendary pipe organist. He was at the top of his field nationally. He played at Riverside Church for many decades, and then, much to everyone's astonishment, moved to the Crystal Cathedral and Robert Schuller's very right-wing church in California. But he wanted a new challenge, and so he was there for many years. But he was the president of the American Guild of Organists for a long time. He played recitals. He was a choir director. He was just truly legendary for his ability to play the pipe organ, because it turns out every pipe organ is different. So he could sit down at any pipe organ and figure it out very quickly and play it. He leaves his partner of 64 years, George Dickey, and a stunning career. And while we're on music, how do we explain this? The Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, D.C. is performing at the Mormon Temple there, or did, on December 6th. We haven't heard about the temple exploding, so presumably that went off okay.
All right. In Florida, but in the court challenge to Florida's anti-woke act, Governor DeSantis's lawyers were forced by the court to define woke, and their lead lawyer said it is the belief that there are systemic injustices in American society and the need to address them. Oh, well.
He's against that.
The Stonewall Museum down there is going to hold a rally in Tallahassee, the capital, January 21st, in defiance of Florida's plans to limit public protest at the Capitol. So they're taking on that law.
Look, it's just unbelievable how Ron DeSantis is using the government to stop free speech, completely contrary to what the Constitution says and completely contrary to what his colleagues are arguing in the Supreme Court right now.
And in the spirit of 1984, he calls Florida the freedom state, when all he does is limit freedoms.
Exactly.
Well, Governor Murphy in New Jersey is expanding some. He's appointed the first trans cabinet member in state history, Allison Chris Myers, the acting chair of the state Civil Service Commission starting January 1. She's an attorney, Navy vet, who has worked at the commission since 2001, deputy chair since June. For Myers to become the full-time chair would require Senate confirmation. Murphy's cabinet is the first to have a majority of women.
Wow. And we've been following the long trek of Julius's bar in Greenwich Village here to be landmarked. And that landmark was reached this week when the Landmarks Commission approved that.
That's not the Landmarks Commission. Those are gay people asking to be served alcohol when it was illegal, and they won their case in 1966 at Julius's. It's an 1825 structure on West 10th Street. It's the city's oldest gay bar, one of the oldest continuing bars in the city. And so congrats to the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation for making that happen.
Yes. Shall we move on to international news?
Well, Anthony Rapp lost his suit versus Kevin Spacey for sexual harassment. He's now being ordered to pay $39,000 to Spacey because he didn't win his case. He said he was assaulted when he was 14 years old. It did kind of end Spacey's career.
It kind of did.
All right.
All right. In Japan, a Tokyo court has upheld the marriage ban, but also said in its opinion that lack of legal protection for same-sex couples violates their human rights. So that's sort of lobbying on their part with the parliament to pass legalization of same-sex marriage, although they refuse to do it themselves.
And Tokyo did start issuing certificates recognizing same-sex couples this month. Only a couple of rights, but there are 200 other cities that have done it. So Iran, I think it's the Attorney General said, we're going to abolish the morality police, whose murderous enforcement sparked all those nationwide protests, but it doesn't end the crackdown on LGBTQ people, nor on women, defying the dress code.
And in Russia, President Putin has gone ahead and signed what we told you about last week, the expanded ban on anything LGBTQ appearing in public, not just written things for minors, but any expression of affection between people of the same sex, any writings anywhere aimed at adults or children or anyone. He's really trying to just make us disappear or distract people from the Ukraine war.
But there's a gay activist there, Dr. Peter Pyotr Voskryensky, who opened an LGBTQ history museum in his home in St. Petersburg that you can come visit at night. And he says, there used to be one in the 19th century under Tchaikovsky's name because he was gay and his brother was gay. But he's really standing up, and that's very brave.
Joan Nessel has started the Lesbian History Archives in her home on the Upper West Side, but she wasn't facing a law like Putin's.
And Ukraine President Zelensky is trying to ban the Orthodox Church as a pro-Russian center of influence, hurting the war effort. Our Supreme Court, of course, would defend their religious freedom to bring down the country.
All right, AIDS and health news.
Well, I do want to remind people that the new COVID variants are on the loose. Everybody I know is getting it. In the last 14 days, cases are up 23%, test positivity up 35%, hospitalizations 20%, ICUs 20%. So get your 5 shots, which is all you can. I have, including the bivalent booster, but it won't protect you from infection. You got to mitigate it with masks, and not enough people are doing that.
I still am. Right now I'm at home, so I don't have to wear the mask because no one else is here.
I am too. And it was World AIDS Day on December 1st. And
it was.
A lot of play.
Well, the FDA has come out with a new proposed plan for loosening rules for blood donations. Monogamous gay men can donate blood, but they have to be with their current partner within for more than 3 months. If it's less than that, you still have to wait to donate until you pass some 3-month window. It's too complicated. It's still discriminatory. It doesn't hold straight people to the same standard. It's a mess. The U.S. Public Health Service has announced it will not automatically reject people with HIV or chronic hepatitis B from working at the U.S. Public Health Service. That's the first uniform service to say that. The Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Space Force, Coast Guard, and National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration still have to make that decision, and Lambda Legal has a case against them for employment of people with HIV.
Okay. Entertainment news?
Sure.
Randy Carlisle is going to perform on Saturday Night Live on Saturday.
Yes.
It's going to be hosted by Steve Martin and Martin Short, who do Only Murders in the Building.
My DVR is set, so I always DVR Saturday Night Live, so I can fast forward through all the horrible sketches to the one or two things I want to see.
I want to recommend Spoiler Alert, the gay tragicomedy starring Jim Parsons and Ben Aldridge there, and featuring P-Flag mom Sally Field and Tony winner Bill Irwin, who are Aldridge's parents. It's based on a book by Michael Osiello, a writer, a TV writer. It portrays a complicated long-term relationship and how, of course, it's affected by Ben Aldridge's character terminal illness, which is the spoiler alert. So bring tissues, I would recommend it.
The reviews have been kind of mixed on that.
I was affected by it. I think it's well done.
Okay. And do we really care that Ben Platt and Noah Galvin are now engaged?
Well, it's the fascinating thing is they both played the lead characters in Dear Evan Hansen, one after the other, and so now they're together. They agreed to hang out forever.
And as we continue to follow the honored career of Billy Porter, we will now show him getting his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Well, I think his quote was great. He says, "I'm grateful to stand in front of the world as an out loud and proud representation of what being Black, queer, and HIV positive looks like in 2022. My queerness is no longer a liability. It is my greatest superpower."
I'm all for Billy Porter, but we, every time he steps out the door, we put him on this show. All right. And you saw Ain't No Mo.
On Broadway, an audacious and funny show about American Blacks being sent back to Africa through a series of skits. That's Jordan E. Cooper, 27, who says he's the youngest playwright produced on Broadway ever. He's the star of Pose, who was also featured in this show as Peaches, the check-in agent for the plane that's going to take people away. It's backed by a terrific supporting cast. If you show the next picture, that's the skit called The Real Baby Maker, Baby Mamas of the South Side. Basically, it's a must-see. I've never seen anything on Broadway like it.
Wow, maybe we should just end on that rather than the down of David Archuleta's story, the former American Idol contestant, who did a concert in Delta, Utah. And in the course of the concert, he refers to being gay. He came out a couple of years ago on American Idol. And he says the emails were so nasty to him that it ruined his Christmas experience. So that brings us full circle on the violent threats and attacks part of this show.
But he urges people to have uncomfortable conversations about these things. And,
yes.
And it's a little uncomfortable for us to ask for your help, but we really appreciate the support you've been sending us. If you want to support Gay USA, go to gayusatv.org and you can make a donation before the end of the year. It's tax deductible.
That will make us happier than we are telling the violent news. Thank you for that segue, Andy. And we're in our last second, so we'll just say we'll be back next week. Thank you for watching. Thank you for helping. See you then.